Hello and welcome back once more to the Digital Bird Camera Motion Control System project. Now, today I'm very pleased to announce the release of the new DB3 VISCA pan tilt head. And for those of you who have been following the project up to now, you'll already be very familiar with the previous pan tilt head, which is still available, which is the Digital Bird Balance pan tilt head. Now, while this has been by far the best seller in terms of the kit overall, for some of you it has had a few drawbacks, and the whole purpose of this head is to try and address some of the failings or the items which you have requested that this head was capable of. Not least of those has been the ability to connect the head over an IP network. So if we take a look at that first, you'll see that this head differs particularly in this base or static base on the bottom of the head. Now, when you have a wired system, it's very important that the wires don't spin around with the head. So it's desirable that the base of this that hold these cables, your long cables coming away from the system, are static and not spinning around. And if we have a look at that base a little more closely, I'll just turn this head around so I can see what's going on. You can see that you have a number of different ports. Now, the top one here is our HDMI port, and we have HDMI pass-through. So what happens is, when we turn the head back around to the other side again, there we go. So we have HDMI coming out of our camera here into an HDMI pass-through at this point, and then that pops out here on the base, which is static, and we have an HDMI port coming through here. Now, we also have a SDI pass-through. So if you are lucky enough to own a camera with SDI, then you plug your short SDI cable from here into here. And again, we have an SDI pass-through, put that away, an SDI pass-through coming out here. So we have HDMI SDI. Over here, we have our RJ45 network cable coming into the head at this point. Now, you will find that we've added even more features to it, but I haven't included them in this head yet. So if we have a look at this base here, we have the same HDMI SDI, and we have our RJ45 coming in here. And below that, we have a DTAP port and a small switch. Now, on the top here, you can see a DTAP port as well. And the DTAP port is there to power our cameras. Now, the head generally is powered using a PoE switch, not unlike this one. And you need a switch basically that can accommodate all the heads you want to use, plus an additional port for your computer. In the base of here, we have a PoE splitter. So that takes our network signal from our computer and the PoE switch and splits off the power to power the head. So it takes out 12 volts, and then we down that 12 volts to 7.5 volts to power the various other components on our head. Below this, and we can see one here, you will find there will be a DTAP port like this one. Now, the reason for that is because some camera systems require more than 12 volts. It may be a 14 volts, it may be 12 volts, or it may be 9 volts. This particular camera system here, and most of the mirrorless camera systems, will require 7.5 volts. And we can take that 7.5 volts, as I have here, from the 7.5 auxiliary port up into a dummy battery in the camera here. But what if you need 9 volts or 12 volts or 14 volts? Well, that's where these DTAPs come in. So if you add 12 volt power to the DTAP, which will be there on this one, then what you get out here is the 12 volts. If you add 9 volts down here, you get 9 volts up here. Now, there are other ways, which I'll get into in more depth in the build videos, about how you can tailor more specifically the power coming out of that DTAP. But essentially, that DTAP port is to power your camera system. I'll go into the functioning of the VISCA side of things with OBS and vMix a little later on in the video. But for now, I'll crack on and try and cover some of the other new features. Because while the VISCA base is a big part of the development of this new head, it's not the only thing by far. So one big feature is that there are now encoders on all 4 axes of the head. So the pan, the tilt, and the focus and the zoom all have encoders built into them. And this allows us to do away with, if you remember on the previous head, we had a small joystick on the top here which allowed us to control and set the key points on the head. So now that we have encoders built into all the axes on the system, setting key points is much more intuitive. So if we want to change our key point, if we send that to our B position or our out point, in order to change that now, we can just manually move the head to point at our new subject matter. Let's say we point up at the light here. Accept that, and the head will go back to its start point, ready to play that move. So now when we play that move, the head will come up and play the move for us. Now, if you still would prefer to use a joystick to set these positions, you still can, using the joystick on the Wi-Fi controller. If you press a small button on the top, then we find that when we set our out point again, we can now use that controller to set that out point where we want it, confirm it, go back, and play our move. So another new feature on the system, if we just move it around, is the addition of the tally lights. And we have tally lights front and rear, the front ones being for the talent. So if you're using this for live performance recording, then it's very useful for your talent to know when the camera and which camera is actually recording. Now, with the Wi-Fi PTZ setup and the OBS PTZ setup, that will only work when you actually record that particular point. So now we can see that the light's lit, so the camera is recording. If I turn it off again, it stops. Now, tally lights work slightly differently between OBS and vMix. OBS, there currently isn't any support for tally lights. I've spoken to the developers of the plugin for OBS, and I'm very hopeful that at some point in the future they will provide support for the tally lights. On the vMix, when the camera is in the preview window, this light will be blue. When the camera is in the main or live window, this light will turn red. Okay? In terms of the Digital Bird PTZ system, whenever I say go live to the camera or start recording, the light turns red. And when I turn the camera off, it comes off. Now, for those of you using it for product videos, etc., this may become quite annoying to you. You may find that you get reflections from the red light coming on. So there is a new function on the controller to allow you to turn tally lights off. If we turn the head around here, we can see that we have, as with the original head, we have a small window here with an OLED display which tells us our PTZ ID for our wireless PTZ and our battery state through that window here. While the head can be completely powered by the PoE switch, we also have the ability to plug in a battery and drive the upper part of the head from the battery, which is, if you're using it purely in Wi-Fi mode, that's still essential. And I think I've already been through the other ports here. You have to say you have again a shutter port here, so you control the shutter through this cable here, which could be a video stop start or take a picture. Now the head also has reed switches on the tilt and the pan axis, and when we power the head on to begin with, you'll find that it goes through a simple routine to establish that home position. Now it's important that we do that, particularly for the PTZ side of things. And this is a feature which I didn't have on the original head, but by sending the head accurately to a home position, it means that all our PTZ stored poses and all our key point positions that we may have stored on the system have an accurate start point from which to work from. So this head uses 1 to 5 gearbox on the tilt axis, which allows it to keep up better with the pan side of things when you're using it in PTZ mode. Okay. Previously, it was, on the last head, I think I had a 19 to 1 gearbox, which was very sturdy, but probably overkill for the job, to be honest. And certainly with the 1 to 5 gearbox, we can happily carry at least 3.5 kilograms of payload on the camera side. In terms of the cameras, I have the Sony A7 III on here. It will happily take cameras like the Blackmagic, the Panasonic block cameras, and the Z-Cam cameras as well would all be perfectly at home, I think, on this head. They're all similar sort of weight and similar kind of dimensions. In terms of other equipment you are likely to need running a head like this from the VISCA side of things, I've mentioned already your PoE switch, essential for powering the head and the connectivity. And you will find that if you have to use HDMI, as I do with this camera, that pretty much after about 2 meters, you're going to find that you need to boost the power of the HDMI. Certainly if we're looking at a venue where you might be, 60 feet, 100 feet away from the camera, 100 feet away from the control system, then you're going to need an HDMI booster. Now these usually come as a pair, and I've got 2 here. So what we have is the HDMI coming out from the base here and going into this HDMI extender, which is a TX end. And we have a standard then Cat6 cable, which can run our 60 feet or 100 feet or whatever to our HDMI receiver or RX6 receiver. And then out the other end of the receiver, so our Cat6 is coming in this side, and our HDMI is coming out of this side and comes into, now again this will vary depending on how many heads you're running, but I have a very simple HDMI to USB converter, okay, which plugs directly into my computer system. So that gives me an HDMI signal all the way from the camera down through the head, through the boosters and into this box here and straight into the computer. Now this is a very simple setup, and there are innumerable numbers of variations on that depending on your budget and how many systems you're running and how far you need to run them. But this really is the basic. You will need to use the VISCA setup with the camera. And in this situation, it's generally your computer which is recording the video, as opposed to the card on the camera. So as I said before, the system is completely capable, as the last one was, of Wi-Fi control. You can control, in terms of PTZ functionality, up to 3 camera systems. And a camera system doesn't just have to be the head. A camera system can be the head on a slider or the head on a boom. And so you can control 3 of those completely wirelessly. Obviously you would need some sort of Wi-Fi transmitter on the camera as well to send the video signal out to your system. Or you can use the VISCA setup with the applications for vMix or OBS. Now to set up this head for VISCA, you will need the Wi-Fi controller. Okay. Now this is primarily because we need to set initially the IP address on this head. Now you only have to set this once for this head. You make sure all the other heads you're using are switched off, and you can set the IP address from the controller here for this head. Now the other variable here is the camera system you're using and the lens you're using. Now obviously we have limits set on this so that if I tilt down it will stop before it crashes into the bottom. And likewise, when I use the focus or zoom, we need to set limits for how far these are able to travel, and they will vary depending on the lenses you're using. So you will find a button in the PTZ menu called Focus Zoom Limits. So the way we set that is we press Focus Zoom Limits. It gives us a splash screen asking us to stand behind the camera and move it to the lower limit. So what we do is we tilt the head down as far as we know we're capable and just bring it back a touch. We move our focus along as far as it's capable of going, and our zoom also along as far as we can. We hit next, and then we move the tilt all the way back as far as it will go and then bring it back just fractionally. And we move our focus all the way around to its furthest extent in the other direction, and likewise the zoom to its full extent in the other direction. And we hit next, and the system should then go back to its home position. So now we have set these limits. We find that when we go forward, we can't go too far forward on the head, and backwards we can't go too far back. It prevents us from doing that. Likewise with our focus, the focus should stop before it crashes into the end. And our zoom as well. So now that I've covered most of the new features, I think, on the head, what I'll do is take you into OBS and show you how it performs with those applications. Okay, so here we are inside OBS, a great resource, which is the open broadcast software, which is free to download. And we can see that we have a number of windows. Now this video isn't going to explore how you use OBS. There are lots of much more detailed explanations on all of this elsewhere on YouTube. So my main purpose in being in here is to show you how the DB3 head works inside OBS and how you set it up. Once you've installed OBS on your system, the next step is to install this plugin, which you can see in the window on the left here, which is the PTZ control plugin by G-Lightly. Again, you go to the OBS homepage and go to plugins, and if you rifle through there, you should find it quite easily. So install that plugin, and once you've done that, if you go to the docs option on the top menu here and come down, you should see an option for PTZ control. We click on that, and this window here should open up PTZ control, and you can dock that down here because you're probably going to be using it a lot if you have PTZ heads. Now, assuming that you have already set up a camera, I'll briefly go through the windows that are here in OBS. So on the left here we have our preview window, and on our right we have the actual live window, the live window we're using currently to record in. Scenes you set up on the left here, and these can mean different things to different people, so I'm not going to give a huge explanation on scenes. The one I'm more interested in as a start point is sources, and in sources, if you click on plus, is where you should find the camera feed from your camera that's on your pan tilt head. And it's important that you have at least one scene set up and one source for that scene, which is one camera. In the presenter window, for example, here we can see that camera 1 is the current camera that I'm feeding on up here. Okay. If we go back now to the PTZ control menu, and this also assumes that you've gone through the steps of providing your particular PTZ head with its own IP address. And if you haven't done that already, there's a particular video and description on that coming. So we've set up our PTZ head to have its own unique IP address, and you can be running any number of PTZ heads on the OBS system, but each one must have its own unique IP address. To set up a new PTZ head, if you go down here to the small gear logo on the bottom, click on that, and that opens up this window.
which is titled PTZ Device Settings. Now, I already have this camera or this PTZ head set up here, but the way you add a new one is you click on the plus here. And if we come, it gives you this drop down menu, and the one we're interested in here is VISCA and in brackets UDP. So you click on that. It pops up here on the device list, and if you highlight that one, the new one, we can see on the right we have source at the top. Now this is where we set the camera that we've set up previously in sources. So if I click on that and come down to Cam1 capture, that's basically saying use Cam1 capture or the camera I've currently got set up on the system and associate it with this particular PTZ head. Below that we can enter the PTZ head IP address that we've set up for that head, 192.168.137.80, say. And underneath that we have a port number for our UDP port. Now that will default to something like 52381, but we must always have it as 1259. Okay, so when you're using the Digital Bird Systems PTZ head, the UDP port must always be 1259, and we can say apply to that. Below this we have camera settings. The first setting there is the number of presets. Now this is the number of presets that you can pre-program, or positions for the head that you can pre-program into the system. Now the Digital Bird DB3 head has 16 memory slots for presets, and because the OBS system uses the memory slots on the head as opposed to vMix, which uses its own, which stores its memory of positions in the vMix software, we set this to 16 in the case of OBS. Underneath this you can set your maximum pan and tilt speed. I like to set it quite low, your zoom speed quite low, and your focus maximum speed quite low. Below this, it doesn't really concern us because we're not controlling the camera directly from here, so we can ignore everything below that side of it. And you can play around with the Modify Expert VISCA settings below that to help tune the system. But if we're happy with all that, we can hit apply, and that now is our head set up. And we can check it's set up. If we click, we should see it here displayed underneath the control panel. And this one I know is set up for this particular camera, so I highlight that. Then that is the first PTZ head. Now if I use the arrow keys, we can see that they are now controlling that head, and that's telling us that that head has been found, the IP address is correct, and it's currently active. Okay, so on the right it has given us the 16 presets we requested. Now I've previously set some of these up, so if I click on preset 1, that's here. If I click on preset 2, it's a wider shot. 3 should point at my little webcam, which is showing us the camera there. And 4 I think is just a shot out the window. Okay, come back to 1. At the top here, as I said previously, I think this is the preview window. So what we've done is set up what I have done is set up a number of scenes. So my first scene might be cam 1 is of me here. I can translate that over now over to there. Because it's set on 4, I'll just preset that back to 1. That's more helpful. So you can select any of the presets while you're in the live window. And the system automatically jumps into these presets. Okay, so setting a preset is really very simple. All we have to do is click on the preset we want to set, perhaps preset 7. We can then move our camera to the position we're looking for. Let's say a view of my messy desk. Right click on 7 and say save preset. If I go back to preset 1 now, camera moves to preset 1. If I move to 7, we get a nice view from my messy desk. Okay, now the other thing you can do is we still have the ability to use our Digital Bird Wi-Fi controller even while we have the whole system set up using VISCA. You'll find that provided you're in PTZ mode on the Wi-Fi controller, we can still use that, and if I come down, I can still move the camera around quite happily with the Wi-Fi setup. Now this is quite useful to know, not least if you happen to lose your VISCA connection, then you still have the Wi-Fi connection ready to go there. And I find as well that it's actually a much nicer way of controlling the head, okay, using the Wi-Fi system. And provided you have a good Wi-Fi signal, there's no reason why you can't run both at the same time and glean the benefits of both. Okay, I think that's enough for OBS. Let's move on to vMix. Okay, so here we are in vMix, and for technical reasons, nothing to do with the head or vMix itself. It keeps crashing on me. I think it's this aging laptop I've had to run it on here. I had to reinstall it on this laptop because my license, free license ran out, and I don't actually use vMix generally, so I'm not paying £700 for a full license for this application. But to take you through as best I can, this is how vMix comes. There's no plugin to install for the PTZ operation. However, you have to buy at least the 4K license, which I think is £700 for the lifetime license, $50, or sorry, $700, $50 a month if you're paying it monthly to get this application. So I know this isn't ideal, but I'll take you through as best I can. So our PTZ head is plugged in and everything is set up ready to go. We've set our IP address on it as we did with OBS before we start any of this. We've uploaded vMix onto the system. And the way it comes in is we have two windows, small windows here marked blank, and these are the equivalent of the OBS scenes really. Now to add an input, basically there's an add input button at the bottom, and the first thing we need to do, if we click on that, say more, okay, and on the menus on the side, if we pick camera, and up here we can find our HDMI capture card. Now that's basically the capture card that I've got plugged in, running from the head. Okay, so I click on that, leave everything as it is and say OK. And now we can see that we're getting a feed. Now, as with OBS, this is the live window here, and this is the preview window over here. Currently there's nothing previewing, it's live. Now for the other camera, yeah, so to make this camera into a PTZ camera, what we need to do here is click on the small configuration icon at the bottom there. And that produces this window on top. In this menu on the left we have a PTZ option. If we click on that, it gives us up our very similar to the OBS plugin. At the top here we've got device type. If we highlight that and come down the list until we see PTZ Optics VISCA UDP, that's the one we're looking for. Okay. Underneath then we can type in the IP address for our head, and you can type it, I've already got it in the list here, and it's 192.168.137.80, and click connect. and all being well, it should be connected. Now we should find that if we use the arrows as before, whoa, speed's a bit high. I turn the speed down. And use the arrows. You can see, and there I am. And we can go up and down exactly the same as we could with the OBS version of all this. It's worth turning on tally lights. Now, one of the nice features of vMix is it does have control over the tally lights on the system. So when using the system with vMix, the tally lights up here, I don't know how well you can see that, but the tally light is currently red. Okay, that means that that camera is in the main recording window. To record a position, there's a large green button at the top here says create input at this position. If we click on that, we get an updated camera position. Now if we move our camera around or zoom in, move it across slightly, whoop, and bring it down to the desk. You can get an idea of what's going on here. Holding a GoPro. Now all we need to do is say create a new position at that point, and it adds another one. So there we go, we've got two in there, and we can close this window. So if we take that now and click on there, now it goes to that position, and if we click on this one, the system goes to the second position we've got set up. If we go ahead and add, I've got a webcam plugged in here as well. So if I add more, add another camera, and it's this HD webcam. Say OK to that. Then you can see the webcam has been added there. If we put that in the preview window by clicking there, if we look up now and then make that live, quick play that into the live window, we can see that up here on the head now our tally lights have turned blue. That's because currently our PTZ head is in the preview window and not the live window. So our talent knows that that's the next camera coming up. Okay, so we do a quick play now over from that one again. Okay, and this is the trouble I've been having with this laptop, it's freezing. So, I don't know if you can follow all that. I'm still getting a picture on this window that's working, that's live. But that's the only difference. I mean, I have had this all working very well on my larger PC up here, but the license is gone now. This laptop is giving me a great deal of trouble for some reason. So it's not been ideal, but that's how the system works with vMix. Okay, so that's it for the DB3, I think. There's a much longer build video, as usual, for the head, if you're interested in actually building one of these. You can find all of the parts, kits, on the Digital Bird Shopify channel, and I'll leave a link below to all of that. Like and subscribe to the project. Without your support and without people purchasing the kits, I would never have been able to take the time to develop the system this far. So thank you very much for those of you who have embraced the project and built some of the items. And it's great to see some of them being used as well. If you have some pictures of the head in nice locations, very much appreciate seeing those. And see you next time.